My dad was the type of person who was never eager to make a decision. There was a point where I just didn't understand it. Like, I used to get annoyed at it. Eventually, he and I had a conversation. He told me why. And for him, the decisions I make today doesn't only affect me now, it affects the future. This has been the year of challenges in every aspect of my life. The greatest things I learned was understanding produces peace. Asking for an understanding heart and an understanding mind, it allows wisdom to be born. I'm saying all of this to say, man, in this season of giving, right, or asking or receiving gifts, the greatest gift for me that I've received this year was the gift of understanding. Welcome to the new episode of the Miles High Podcast. This is Miles Jr. As always, the vision and goal of this podcast is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist, always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right. So, I've been saying for this entire year, this has been the year of challenges for me. So from the beginning of this year, I had my fasting period. I heard a word in my spirit that said, challenges. Didn't really know what it meant. But, as I progressed through the year, I started to gain a better understanding of exactly what that meant. And this has been the year of challenges in every aspect of my life, right? Personal life, professional life, spiritual life. I have been challenged, right? And all of these challenges started to feel like a workout, right? But, I didn't allow myself to get too high or too low, regardless of what was going on. I tried to keep a level head and just have a better appreciation for the reason for what it is that I was experiencing, right? And trying to learn as much as I could from them, because I know it has been and is preparing me for what's to come in the future. I've learned throughout this year patience. I've learned to have peace or to be at peace. I've learned to have a better sense of emotional intelligence. I have learned about timing. I've learned about my faith. I've learned about trust. All of these things I have, though I may have known them before. This year was a bit more intense, or a bit more special, right? A bit more intentional. So all of these things I've been working on personally in my life, just being a better individual, right? Or trying to be a better individual in all aspects. Definitely hasn't been easy. Definitely is a continued work in progress. But that's what it's supposed to be, right? We're not supposed to get it all at once and just be done with it, right? It's a continued process. And like I said, every challenge just felt like an intense workout, right? I found myself being just exhausted of the different challenges that would come. I started to just express that in a particular way, right? I would just say, man, my brain is tired. Just like trying to think through and go through all of these things, like my brain is completely exhausted. And, just took breaks when I needed to, took time off. I think one of the greatest things I learned was patience and peace, right? But the sense of peace where, like, you're just quiet in the moment, right? Even though things around you may be evoking some type of emotion, right? You don't allow that to come out. You don't allow yourself to express those emotions. You just remain at peace within those situations and just kind of let it play out, right? It's almost like the 48-hour rule, right? When you have something that happens or you need to make a decision, give yourself 48 hours and you should be in a better place to make a decision. And I, was meditating one day recently. We're coming down to the end of the year. Christmas is right around the corner. First of all, this is the best season, my most favorite season of the year. I love the Christmas holiday. It's a time that it's very nostalgic for me, just because of what this holiday has meant to my family, and how my parents and I would celebrate this occasion, and our extended family would get together, and this was just a great time, man, a great experience. In the Bahamas, we don't get too much of a winter season, but when we're able to have like a cold Christmas, or well, we call it a cold Christmas in the Bahamas, but it could be a summer day for others who experience real cold, right? But nonetheless, it's a cool Christmas for us, and I really appreciate those, because it just adds a bit of freshness to the season. And weather has been a bit warm and cold, but we've had our cool days, and I'm hoping that this Christmas season we have a cool weather experience. But it's my favorite time of the year. I've been enjoying and playing Christmas music ever since the beginning of November, and it's because I just love this season, right? I love the feeling that this season gives me, right? It pushes me into the new year, right? I've come through, especially this year, come through a very challenging year. So just getting to this point, and just finding some time now to relax and enjoy, right, this season with my family. I have my daughter now, and this would be, obviously we had a Christmas with her last year, but she was all of about 2 years old. But this year she's over 12 months now, so she's moving around. She could appreciate things a little more. So I'm looking forward to, just spending this holiday season with them. So in the holiday spirit, I was sitting and just kind of meditating over the year, right? I wouldn't say I was kind of doing a year in review, right? No, it wasn't that intentional. It was just, I was just literally just chilling, kind of taking some time to myself. And I just remember this verse, this scripture verse popping up in my spirit. And I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but after maybe a week and a half, I started to realize a few things, and I wanted to share that within this particular episode. So the verse that popped into my head was Proverbs 4:7, and it says, "Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding." Right? Other translations of the Bible, it says, "Though it cost you all you have, get understanding." So, I've heard this verse millions of times. Ever since 2015, I have always made it a habit to pray. Like when I pray, ask God to continue to bless me with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Like that's been a daily prayer of mine. And over these 15 years, I could say that he's done just that. I've had, these decisions to make, might not have made all right decisions, but I think the majority of them have worked out to my advantage. So that's always been a prayer of mine, right? So I didn't really think too much about this verse. Then maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and he said something in our conversation that connected that verse to this other verse this particular verse didn't jump into my spirit, but this popular event in the Bible popped into my spirit, and this was part of the conversation that a friend of mine and I were having, and we were talking about Solomon, and we were just saying how Solomon was not only the richest man to ever have lived, but he was the wisest to ever have lived. And we were kind of going through, man, like if Solomon was alive today, like what would his net worth be? And I think it worked out to be somewhere between like 2 trillion and 3 trillion, $3 trillion. So crazy wealth, right? And I was having this conversation with him. During the conversation, like Proverbs 4:7 popped back up in my mind. And I guess, remember this particular piece of, though it cost you all you have, get understanding, right? Didn't really put it together. I didn't know why at the time that popped into my head. But, my spirit eventually brought it all together for me, right? And I remembered, so I thought about Solomon and him being the wisest man in the world. And, when we have these conversations about Solomon being the wisest man in the world, a lot of the times we say, he's the wisest man in the world because Solomon asked God for wisdom. God came to Solomon in a dream one night and said, man, whatever, ask me anything, whatever it is, and I'll give it to you. And, what we interpret from that particular passage in the Bible is that Solomon asked God for wisdom. And I remember I was urged to, in my spirit, I was urged to go read that passage again. And it's 1 Kings 3, verse 7 to 14. And I've read this verse before, and I've gotten this revelation before, but I was reminded of it in this conversation with my friend because I knew I got this revelation, years ago. I want to say maybe like in 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. But it means so much more now because of the type of year that I had, and now I'm starting to connect things, especially coming down to the end of this year and kind of mulling over what I've experienced this year and really trying to get an understanding of what it was all for. And I want to read this. This passage, right? So 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 7 to 14. And it says, "Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant," this is Solomon talking. "Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for the discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings." And then it says, "Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his court." So the portion of that verse, other translations of the Bible. So I want to read what King James says, right? Because there's a slight difference in wording that different versions of the Bible use. So with the King James version, I'll jump to verse 9. It says, "Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people?" I hate the King James version. And then it says, and the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon asked this thing. And then other versions of the Bible, it says, it pleased the Lord that Solomon asked for wisdom, right? So that's kind of where this knowledge or this interpretation of what Solomon did was that he asked for wisdom, right? Because certain version of the Bible says that the Lord was pleased that he asked for wisdom. But, my spirit pushed me like to really study this verse. And what Solomon asked for was an understanding heart, right? Or a mind that understands things. And then I started to think about what understanding was, right? And so wisdom works. Wisdom is a formula, right? The way that you show yourself wise, or the way that wisdom is achieved, is you take information and then you comprehend or understand that information. And then that understanding helps you to apply that information in different ways. And then that application of the information that is understood leads to wisdom. So the fact that Solomon asked for understanding, it shows that he knew what wisdom involved or what it took to achieve wisdom. Now, this may be something simple for others, or it may not seem relevant for a lot of people, right? And I do realize that we're all in different aspects of our lives, and what may be a revelation for me today may be a revelation for you 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or maybe this was a revelation for you 5 years ago. But because of our life's journey, like these different moments in our lives come to a head where we interpret and receive a particular type of revelation. And this was a revelation for me, right? Because again, going back to Proverbs 4:7, it says that though it costs you all you have, get understanding. So I started to realize for this year, right, these challenges that I have been going through. Yes, achieving a level of patience was great, a level of peace, understanding how to, master my emotional intelligence. But I think ultimately, and this is what I gained from, this meditation period that I had, was these challenges were placed on me to show me that I need to get a better understanding of things, right? Not just of information, but of events, of experiences. And that understanding produces all of the fruits of these things that I said, right? Understanding produces peace. Understanding produces patience. Understanding produces emotional intelligence. Because when you understand something, it doesn't affect you either way, right? Whether something good happens or bad happens, that understanding gives you these peaceful moments to where you're able to process and think through what is happening and then apply, whatever types of information. And then it started to remind me of my dad. I've had this conversation, early on in my potting. And I don't remember referencing it recently, but this came back to mind because of what I learned, right, from this passage. My dad was the type of person who was never eager to make a decision. And I remember there was a point where I just didn't understand it. Like it didn't matter what the decision was. It could have been what I felt was a simple decision, but for him, he took his time making all decisions. And I used to get annoyed at it because I was like, Dad, you taking so long to make these decisions. Like these shouldn't take this long. Let's just make the decisions, right? And eventually, he and I had a conversation. He told me why, and because for him, the decisions I make today doesn't only affect me now; it affects the future, right? It affects you guys. It affects my extended family. It affects the people that I oversee in all of my businesses, right? So I have to be really patient and purposeful in the decisions that I make. And I started to kind of connect the dots between all of that, and all of it led back to understanding. My dad had a great sense of understanding not just information, understanding misinformation, understanding things that are not said, understanding past happenings, understanding current happenings, anticipating the understanding of what the future could bring. So Solomon asking for understanding did way more for his life than what wealth could have done, than what long life could have done, than what anything else he could have asked for could have done. And I started to ask myself, man, if I was in Solomon's shoes and God himself asked me, man, what do you want? What would you ask for? I thought about this long and hard, and I might not have asked for riches, I might not have asked for like material things, but I don't know if I would have asked for understanding then, because it just may not it did not it did not seem like something important, right? Even though Solomon did it and he was the wisest man to ever live, maybe I would have asked for wisdom, right? But that's not what he asked for. He asked for understanding. And I think understanding is the most important thing. And the Bible says in Proverbs 4:7, right? If it costs us everything, we need to get understanding. Because once we have a great level of understanding, then nothing is impossible for us, right? Nothing is going to move us. Nothing is going to deter us away from the goal that we've set, because we understand what's happening. We understand why it's happening. We have a great level of perception of or interpretation of this body of information that we have in the front of us or we've experienced before, and we know the moves to make, right? And asking for an understanding heart and an understanding mind, it allows wisdom to be born, right? You're automatically wise when you have a higher level of understanding. Like I remember when I was in high school, I had a Spanish class in high school, and Spanish seemed so difficult for me in high school. I was paying attention, I was eager to learn, but because obviously I thought in English, so a lot of the things that I did to learn Spanish happened in English, so it just wasn't a part of me. And then when I went to college, the learning of Spanish became easier for me because of the foundation that I got in high school. And I didn't realize what that foundation was doing for me, but I caught on to the Spanish language and learning the Spanish language much easier in college because of that high school foundation. And it progressed now when I went to do my study abroad in Valencia, Spain for 6 months. I became fluent in Spanish. I was able to understand the language, able to communicate way better because of all of this history that I had, right? And the understanding that gave me. Understanding just makes life much easier, right? And this was the thread through this year for me. I'm realizing that it all boils down to understanding. Patience and perspective became my ally, right? But in all honesty, I think understanding was the thread that wove those together. And Proverbs 7 and 1 Kings 3, 7 to 14, like really speaks to the importance of understanding. Who doesn't want to be connected to, in any way, shape, or form, the man that Solomon was, right? The history that he has left behind. Was everything perfect that he did? No, but he still had a level of understanding that no one has shown to have even to this day. And God told him that because you asked for this, this is what you're going to have. So I'm saying all of this to say, man, in this season of giving, right, or asking or receiving gifts, I think the greatest gift that we could receive, at least the greatest gift for me that I've received this year, was the gift of understanding, or the knowledge of how important understanding is. I think this is a great way to end this year for me. Just knowing that continued understanding is more important than anything else. So I'll no longer be praying for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. I'll just be praying for understanding, because I know that the wisdom will come naturally and the knowledge is there, the information is there, right? But getting a better understanding of that information is most important. And that's my prayer for all of us, right? As we go through this Christmas season, Christmas is right around the corner. Yes, I want all of us to enjoy times with our family, enjoy the exchange of gifts, the receiving of gifts. But let's not forget, or let's not take for granted the importance of having a better sense or a greater sense of understanding. And as you know, Proverbs 4:7 says, if we can get anything, and though it may cost us all we have, get understanding. So that's my challenge to us for the rest of this year. This would be my last pod for the year. Christmas, like I said, is right around the corner, and my meditation for the remainder of this year and even next year, going into next year, is for continued understanding in all that I do. And that's what I want to leave with you guys as well. So I want to give this final milestone for the year. And this milestone is just a declaration of what this year should close out doing and what next year should open as. And I just want to read this. As we close this year and step into a new year, may God give us what Solomon asked for, an understanding heart and an understanding mind. May we move from just knowing things to understanding them, from collecting knowledge to applying it, and from reacting to responding with wisdom. This Christmas, I'm grateful not just for the gifts under the tree, but I'm grateful for the understanding that's been shaping me all year long. And I pray that the same understanding that has shaped me will shape you and can continue to shape all of us for the coming years. And I think with that understanding, we will definitely achieve high levels of wisdom greater than anyone else could have or will achieve around us. So that's my prayer to everyone. That's my challenge to everyone. Let's seek and continue to seek a greater level of understanding. All right. As always, the vision and goal of this pod is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist. Always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right. So as we close out this year, I want to wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas. See you guys in the new year. Have a safe holiday season, and we'll get back together next year. All right. You guys be blessed.